All right, now that we've got our style.css set up, let's go ahead and look at our functions.php file. Now our functions.php file is a generic file that's going to contain some custom code that wouldn't belong in one of the template files. So this is going to be things like controlling how our theme works, adding in new functionality, letting WordPress know what to do when. It's going to contain a lot of this custom code, again, that wouldn't go in our normal template. And what that means will make more sense as we go. But I want to start off in this showing you two specific things that we want to include in our functions.php file to start off. The first thing we have to look at is a function called add theme support. Now, WordPress offers a bunch of different options that can be used in a theme, but by default, you have to tell WordPress that your theme can support these features. So let's take a look at what these different features are. We have post formats, and these are going to be things like, do you have an aside versus a gallery versus a video? For those of you not familiar with post formats, here are the default WordPress post formats, and they basically just let you say, hey, this is an image post, or this is a quote post, and this is a video post. And then in our theme, we could find this information out and customize how that post is displayed. So that's kind of something there for you to know about, and that's this first area of we could add theme support and we put in post formats. Then there's post thumbnails. Of course you want post thumbnails. These are the featured images, and we could set these up and enable them and tell WordPress, hey, our theme is going to support them. And then when we start trying to use the code to pull in thumbnails, it will work properly. Notice that we not only can enable post thumbnails, but we could say, hey, go ahead and make these available on posts as well as pages, or even custom post types as well. So if you ever wanted to get custom featured images for your pages, this is how you would do that. And then, as I said, later on, we'll be able to use the post thumbnail and it will work just as we expect. There's also custom background support. Now, we won't really get to this till much later in this course when we look at some of the WordPress APIs, but it is possible to allow, we'll just click through here, I could show you. Not showing us a picture there. You can upload and add custom images or backgrounds to your theme, especially in use with the customizer. So we'll add the support now, but we won't actually code it how to do what it needs to do till later. Same thing with custom header. You could upload a custom header, you could upload a custom logo, but in order for that to work and be enabled in the customizer, you have to tell it, hey, my theme can do this. Now, we're going to tell it our theme can do it, but we won't finish coding that out till later. If you want RSS automatic links in there, that's something helpful. HTML markup. Okay, so a while back, HTML5 came out, and it added some new metadata markup and features kind of built into the browser that could be really helpful. So there's an array, a list of different ones that we could enable, and this will simply allow these HTML5 features to be used. We could see search forms, comment lists, gallery, and caption. So might as well go ahead and add those in as well, especially if you're going to be building these out and using HTML5 features. Then we've got add theme support for title tag. So a while back in WordPress, the title tag was in actually one of the template files. And if you're not familiar with the title tag, it's what makes the page title up here, and it displays in SEO results, etc., etc. Very important tag. Now, WordPress has shifted away, and you dynamically add the tag either via the functions.php, or maybe a plugin is doing it, or WordPress has its own way of figuring it all out. So you could see here, instead of using the WP title function, we could just add theme support, and WordPress will do it that way. Now, the last one we have here that we're going to look at is, again, having to do with the customizer and allowing people to quickly and easily see changes automatically. It's going to involve some JavaScript, and we will, again, come back to this much later in the course. But for now, we're going to come into our functions.php file, and we're basically going to add support for everything. We're just going to say, hey, everything's here. And the reason we're doing it that way is so that you have a template to work from for later where you could easily copy and paste what you need. But if you're not going to enable something, then don't add that theme support. So let's come into our functions.php. We'll add a comment here, and we'll just say add theme support. And now we could start typing add theme support. And you'll notice that, again, I have this plugin installed. I'll go ahead and just show you in my packages, WordPress. I have a bunch of content on using Atom, but Atom WordPress is a collection of functions, and it's basically going to give you access to all of the things that we're talking about, and I could just quick type them. So add theme, I could just hit down and enter, and it will automatically do that. So if you're wondering where those shortcuts come from, hey, you could do it too. I'll use them more and more as we go on, but to start off, I'll try to type a little bit more out so that you can see everything. The first one we're going to add is title tag, because this should really be in all of your themes. You should definitely use this approach. It is the best practice around how to handle the titles on pages. So then we've got add theme support. The next one we want to do is post thumbnails, because I'm pretty sure in like pretty much every site you build, you're going to want to have featured images. If you don't want that ability and you're not going to be using it, you don't need to. Next, let's go ahead and add theme support for post formats. So again, these were the things like, is it an aside, is it a gallery, etc., etc. And so we can enable them, and we actually have to enable them bit by bit. So there's a number of different ones that are available. We've got aside, we've got gallery. In fact, you know what, I'm just, I would break this into multiple lines for readability, but I'm just going to keep on typing it this way. So we've got gallery, link, image, singular, quote, status update. Oh, let's turn on soft wrap here. Okay, we keep going. So we've got status, we've got video, audio, and chat is going to be the last one. So again, we're throwing all these in here. You may decide not to use them. In general, I think people and themes have moved away from them, but there are definitely themes, and I actually use these in some of my sites when I really am blogging and want to have a gallery and a video and a little link appear differently. The 2013 theme was a really big one on this. It styled each thing differently, and for some kind of themes, that's really nice and good to have. So let's go ahead and add another one. We'll add theme support for the HTML5 features, and we could do that with HTML5. Notice all the white space between here. Okay, and then another one that's pretty common you might want to add are automatic feed links. And again, that's just going to help with some of the metadata up in your site. Automatic feed links. There we go. And then the rest of these are going to mostly deal with the customizer. So add theme support for, we'll start with the custom background. You know, and I'm just going to copy this because they're very similar. Header, logo, and the last one is a bit longer. Customize, selective, refresh, widgets. Okay, now one that wasn't listed there, but I do know that it was recently added, and we don't have this again supported yet, but we'll look at how to add it later on, is the ability to add starter content to a theme. So what this means is that when you preview a theme or set it up for the first time, you could actually see some of this starter content. And that helps address the issue of sometimes when people get a theme, they don't know how to set it up to look exactly like the demo. And that's what this is meant to help with. So that's the first bit of our functions.php we've got here. We're just going to add in one more thing that won't actually start to work until later, but we're going to load in our CSS. So let me give myself a bunch of room here just so that we could see some more. Okay. So in order to do this, we have to hook into the add action WP in Q scripts, and we have to create our own function to load it. So there's a few things we're going to look at here, but first let's just get everything typed out. We're going to namespace all of our functions with WP hierarchy. So we're then going to call it in Q styles. And the reason we do it this way is if somebody else had a function in Q styles, it might conflict with ours. So if it was in a plugin or something like that, or added somewhere else later, that could be a problem. So by adding WP hierarchy, which is the namespace of our site, it's also what we see as our text domain here. We don't need to do that, but it is a common practice and a good idea. So that's how we're going to name that. And then down below, we're going to hook this into the WP in Q scripts. And then we're going to copy the name of our function in there like this. Boom. So that's all wired up, and what that's going to do is say, hey, when WordPress, when you start loading scripts or CSS onto a page, make sure that you look at my custom function here and do what I'm telling you. And here's what I'm going to tell you to do. We're going to use a function called WP in Q style, and this is actually something, let's not show all of that yet. WP in Q style, and it takes a number of different parameters. And what it does in effect, and we've looked at this at the very beginning of the course in the PHP for WordPress section, but it's basically going to allow us to dynamically say, hey, grab our style.css and add it into the header of any file. So to see a little bit more about what is going on with WP and Q style, we could come over to the codex, and we could see that inside of this function we could pass it a bunch of different options. First, we're going to give it a name that should be unique. Then we're going to give it the URL to our style sheet, and there are a few different ways of doing this. I'll show you. We can make it dependent on other ones. So let's say we had one CSS file called base or style.css. Then we had another style sheet called custom.css. We could say, hey, custom, anytime you load this custom file, make sure that that this other file is also loaded on the page. And so this could help with dependencies. It just makes it a little bit easier to manage, and this is a really nice feature. Next, we have versioning, which is helpful for caching purposes, but it could also be a major pain in the arse if you're trying to develop and WordPress keeps caching your CSS file and you have to clear your caches every time you want to see the changes. So that is a big problem. It says if null is added, no version is added, but that's not even actually always true. Sometimes it will show up still. So I'll show you a little trick to make sure while we're developing, we could get around that, but later you'll kind of hard code or set a version for your CSS. And then finally, but less common, usually not added, if you want to say, hey, only use this for print or only use it for screen or only use it for media queries, you could set that up in the media option here. It can be quite powerful if you are loading style sheets conditionally. Also, you'll often see, and with our simple example here, our media queries are going to be in the same style file, or if you're bundling it all down, that may or may not matter. But helpful thing here, by default, it's going to load for everything, but you can customize and tweak that as well a little bit. So with all that covered, let's come back into our code here and start adding in the parameters. The first thing we'd give it is a name, and this is going to be a name lowercase with no spaces. Hyphens are more common than just one long word. And we're just going to call this our main CSS. You don't really need this until you get a bit more advanced and you could start relying on things, and if you're calling a theme or a CSS file to be dependent, you're going to be using this name. So again, it's important to be clear and unique with it. Now the next thing we have to do is give it a link to our style.css file. And let me show you the absolutely wrong way to do this would be to try to link from the root of your site into your WP content folder, into your themes folder, into WP hierarchy /style.css. So this is definitely a problem and not the correct way to do it. However, WordPress does give us a custom template tag or function, which can be really helpful for getting this exact same information a different way. So what we're going to say is get style sheet directory, so get the URL or get the directory of our style sheet and give us the URI version or URL. So once we have that, we can concatenate it or combine it. Remember, if we have one thing here and then another that we want to combine, we use the period in PHP, and then we could do /style.css. So what that should do is point us into our theme folder. This code will get us to this point, and then we just grab the style.css. So pretty straightforward there. The next thing is going to be an array of dependencies. So let's say, for example, that we had also created something called custom.css, and anytime our main loaded, we wanted that custom to load as well. This is how we would do that, but we're going to pass it just an empty array because we don't have any dependencies at this point. The next thing we have is a timestamp, and remember, the version is what's going to come next here. So we're going to version our CSS based on down to the seconds, the time, and what that will do is trick WordPress into thinking, hey, we have a new CSS file every second, so don't cache this and load me the freshest version. Now this is bad news when you actually launch your site, so eventually you might want to do like 1.1 or something like that. But while we're in development, this is a really handy feature. And then finally, we'll just pass. It's going to be default. We could leave this off, but I'm just going to hard code and show you that we could pass in all to load all of the different devices and conditions. This is for the media section of how and where we want it displayed. Now, even though we have all of that, when we come over to our theme, we're still not seeing this loading. And this isn't because we did something wrong with our functions.php. It's because in our index.php, we haven't told WordPress where to hook in and add any style sheets that we've added programmatically. So what we'll do in the next section is we'll start setting up our index.php file so we could start to see some of the work that we've done at this point come to fruition.